What up? This is Finance, Fitness, and Folk channel. We discuss finance, a little bit of fitness, talk about some folk. So in today's episode, I'm going to discuss why you should have more than one bank account. So admin notes, thanks again to all the subscribe to the channel. I endeavor to keep putting these videos out. Give you lovage, debate yourselves. So let's get into it. So why do I say that you should have more than one bank account? Well, I'm gonna give you a scenario, a true story actually, that happened roughly about 2 years ago. I had discussed this scenario one time before on one of my other finance videos, but I felt like I should elaborate a little bit more on this particular topic because I think it's pretty important. So let's get into it. So my friend, one of my good friends, about 2 years ago, he was in a situation where his older son had became a part of this finance group on Instagram. I'm not exactly sure what kind of group it was, but to give a backstory on how this thing worked. So of course he has a bank account, right? He had a joint and a check and a personal account in this situation, and his son had an account at the same bank, and their accounts were tied. So if his son needed anything, allowance or whatever, he was able to transfer it instantly from his joint or his personal to his son's account. Now his son was a minor at this time when this happened. So anyways, his son asked him one day about some type of Apple Pay situation or whatever. So he kind of dismissed it, and then he went on his bank account because the two accounts were tied. He was able to visually see deposits that went into his son's account, and he saw a deposit for a little bit over $4,000. Now I think his son was like 15 or something at the time. So he's like, well, I didn't deposit this money. So where does money come from, right? So he confronts his son, and his son says he became part of this Instagram group, and it was some type of situation where if the money was deposited, then he was able to flip it and get more money. So instantly, my friend felt like it was a scam. So he investigated a little bit more, and I think a couple hours later, he said the check that was deposited to his son's account populated. He was able to visually see the check on the account, and it was from a person he didn't know. It looked like it was a personal check that was written out. So he immediately thought and confirmed in his mind that it was fraud. So he calls the bank and he tells the bank, my son received a deposit, and we don't know where it came from, and we're not going to spend the money. We want you to investigate and figure out where this money came from, and if it's fraudulent, please send it back to whoever it belongs to. So of course the bank complies, and they freeze his son's account. But here's the problem: when they froze his son's account, any account that touched some other account at that bank was frozen as well. And mind you, he had used one of his joint accounts and one of his personal accounts to transfer money to his son's account. So not only was his son's account was frozen, but those two accounts that belonged to my friend was frozen too, for 10 business days until they figured out what was going on. Now, eventually, the money was sent back to wherever it came from. But think about that now. He couldn't access his money for 10 days. Now, he knows about money like me, so he didn't have, that wasn't his main banking. That was his main bank. So, it was definitely an inconvenience for him not to be able to touch his money. But that didn't stop him from paying bills and other essential things, right? Thank God it didn't, right? And the situation was when they froze it, they could receive deposits, but they couldn't withdraw anything. They couldn't charge anything to those two accounts. But think about that, y'all. Think about if your main bank account was frozen for 10 days, 10 working days. Now think about if this happened on a Friday. I mean, you can't count the weekend, and you can't count the other weekend, right? So we're talking between possibly 12 to 14 days that you cannot access your money. That's like missing a paycheck. And think about this. Just like I said before, more than half of America is living paycheck to paycheck. So think about you losing a paycheck for a month. Now, mind you, like I said, he can still receive deposits. So anything that went into his account after the freeze was lifted, he was able to access it. So he didn't lose money. He just couldn't access it for about 2 weeks. But still, a lot of folks would pretty much would be in a world of hurt if they could access their money for 12 to 14 days. That's just crazy. Like, you cannot go to the bank, you can't withdraw cash, you can't charge anything. Now, like I said, think about if this was your only bank, this was your only account, and you couldn't access your money for about 2 weeks. That would break some families, unfortunately. It just would. So the premise of this video is that you should never have all your money in one bank. Yes, I mean, if you want to have savings at the same bank, you got checking, that's fine. But you need to put you need to put money away for emergencies in another bank. I have multiple banks. I have about 3 of them, right? Not to include my business bank that's separate, right? So, Lord forbid if anything would happen to my accounts at one bank. But if it did, I still have liquid assets in other banks, right? So if something happened like that to me, you know, one monkey wouldn't stop the show, right? I would be able to still survive until whatever situation was resolved, and I was able to get back to that bank account. But that could be detrimental. That could be very problematic for the average family. The average family, I don't think, has more than one bank. More than one bank. They have one bank, and they're able to, and they use everything from that one bank. So please, please consider splitting your assets, your money, in separate banks, so you don't run into a situation to where, you know, your account is frozen. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, and wishing that you would ever be in a situation for fraud, but I mean, but it happens, right? You know, there's always scenarios that I hear about where, you know, somebody from India was able to hack into somebody's bank and pull all their money out, and some banks don't cover that. Let me say that again. If your bank gets hacked and all your money is taken out, some banks don't cover that. So it's like a loss to you. Now, what if you had everything in your bank account at that time when it happened? What would you do? So you need to be able to access money in separate accounts. You should never have all your money in one bag. You should never have, and I mean that goes into also with jobs and stuff. You know, I mean, I'm not saying you should have more than one job. You should have more than one way to make income. But that's another video. That's another time, right? So, anyways, please don't have all your money that you have in one bank. Split your assets up, so you don't be put in a situation where you can't take care of your family because one of your banks got compromised. All right, like, comment, and subscribe. I endeavor to keep putting these out to be leveraged to better yourselves. Finding Fitness and Folk. Triple F. I'm gone.